All right, y'all. So for tonight's episode, we actually have a returning guest. We have Ari Asulin with us again tonight. We had so much fun chatting with him last time that we wanted to have him come back on and maybe share some of his more personal experiences with us. But before we get delving into that, Ari, thank you so much for joining us again tonight. And for our listeners that might not have caught your first episode with us, would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself and your research and just a little bit about what you do?
Absolutely. My website is paradigmthreat.net, and it's a conspiracy repository that's just a collection of all of the various conspiracy theories, investigations, media content that I could collect over the last, I don't know, it's been like about 16 years now. Turned into it went from a hobbyist project into a professional project with the inclusion of LLM agentic development, which just sort of took it to the next level. And now I just have all tons of stuff to share and get into the bottom of some things. It's really exciting, actually.
Constantly sharing stuff with us, by the way. I love getting all the like random little pictures and stuff like that you do with AI because a lot of the time it ends up just being absolute garbage when you try to produce these like images of exactly what you want. But somehow, man, you get them like almost on point for exactly your ideas. So props to you, man, for getting it to actually do what you want it to do.
I know.
Yeah, I've been really stoked to see your work and your posts that you make, and I appreciate you sharing all your work with us. And I always enjoy like when you send one of your posts and I get to look at it. So yeah, like Shayn said, great work on your end. Really enjoying the content you're putting out.
Absolutely.
So I guess unlike last time we were diving a bit into some of your research, diving into like Tartaria specifically, diving into electric universe theory and everything. Absolutely fascinating. So I highly recommend everybody go and check that one out if you haven't already. But as far as today, I know that it's going to end up getting entangled a bit into your research. But the initial thing starts off with, as Orin mentioned, a personal story. So wherever you want to start with the stuff today, man, I'm absolutely looking forward to getting into some of your bizarre encounters, man.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I felt like I should start telling a little bit of my story because it includes some interesting personal experiences that are sort of key primary resources for some of my investigations. For example, I have at least one UFO encounter where a UFO flew over my house in Mesa. And I use this as a piece of evidence. I saw that happened. That was real. My roommates saw it. They remember seeing it. That counts as, testimony. It would show up in court. So, at this point, I in my investigations, at this point, I'm kind of like looking at everything. I'm looking at like, so what was that, and when was that, and were there any other people that saw it? I never bothered looking into that stuff. So I'll start with the UFO story first, and if you guys want me to share some stuff, I can.
Absolutely. You should be able to screen share too. And of course, we want to get into some descriptions of this craft too, because we have a lot of research that we've been diving into as far as like human connections and trying to kind of ward out the different specifications on what exactly the ships might be. So I'd love to get into the description of the ship too.
Perfect. So you should be able to see on my Substack, I recently started posting all my articles, and I'm basically like one article per day. It's like going to be going really fast. And the amazing part is that I do it all before I start work. It takes about an hour to narrate an idea, have it cross-reference with my existing investigations, find online citations, come up with some kind of conclusion, and then generate the article. So I don't really have much of a following, but if you guys want to see my daily articles, just subscribe to my Substack. You'll get stuff like this. So,
and I will include that link down in the show description if anybody wants to go and check it out too, by the way.
Awesome, yeah. Made this article called "What I'm Asking You, Foe." A little joke because you gotta be funny about this stuff because it's such a political dead, it's a dead end. You can't bring this up in almost any kind of serious environment without getting laughed at, including work. So obviously our civilization our species has not settled this at all. So what is this? I'm talking about the UFO phenomenon, which when I started looking into it, I was actually surprised. I'm amazed by how many times the LLM just brings up stuff I wasn't even looking for. I say, track the history of UFO sightings. I expect Roswell to be the first one. Did you guys ever hear about the parade of airships or airship parade?
We actually did an episode on that, probably a year or so ago, Shayn?
Yeah, probably about a year or so ago,
awesome.
Yeah.
I'm glad you guys heard about that.
Yes,
it's
sir.
Actually nothing special. It's just, 60 years prior to Roswell was the exact same thing. A bunch of UFOs in the sky, except they weren't called that back then. Everyone called them airships. And it was the same thing, cigars in the sky and all kinds of weird shapes. But that's not what I saw. Now, one night around 1 a.m., I confirmed this only because I found another report from Phoenix of the exact same thing I described at the same time, same month in April. Woke up at 1 a.m. to a tremble in the house. The house was visibly trembling. I wasn't able to see anything outside, and this thing didn't make that much noise, actually. So honestly, the only noise I felt was sort of environmental trembling. And so I went out and looked out the window, and to the left, I could see basically this triangle heading down towards my street, towards our direction. I woke my roommates. This was actually the second night this happened. The first night I saw it myself. Second night, I woke everyone up, and we all saw it, except my wife missed it. She came out too late. But my roommate confirms that, yeah, it was a black triangle. It was fully opaque. We're not talking about a kind of misunderstanding of what's, different stars in the sky that are triangle shaped. And we're certainly not talking about the meteor shower, which absolutely did occur that night. There was a meteor shower. My roommate and I were avid fans of these showers. We were aware of the schedules, and we would not have mistaken that for something that lasted, I would say, a good 2 minutes before the thing flew overhead and then took off down towards East Mesa. This image that I generated is actually kind of realistic, except that there's not like city lights and that vantage point stuff. But you get the idea. It was pretty much what I saw, except I saw 3 lights. He saw 7 lights. The main story also says 7 lights for the one that you can look up. And it was low to the ground. It was 1,000 feet up in the air, maybe. It wasn't like way out there or anything like that. My first thought was military craft. And so I looked up essentially what kind of craft has been declassified. And there are actually a bunch of websites that say, here's that triangle that you see in the sky. Here's the model number and stuff. Unfortunately, those websites don't have anything backing them. They seem to be made up entirely. And this has never been declassified ever. If you want to know something that has been declassified that's sort of close to a black flying triangle, honestly, I would go back to the so-called flying wing, which showed up in the 40s at the end of World War II. It was a black triangle-shaped post-World War II vehicle with jets in the back. But other than that, it was the exact same thing. Now, it was never shown to the public, and it only appears one time, as far as I know, in that movie, 1953, War of the Worlds by George Powell. George Powell, meaning the filmmaker, obviously, who did one of the first color movies. So anyway, George Powell allowed film of that vehicle in that movie. So I don't really have to convince anyone that these vehicles have been tested by the government. What's much harder to convince is that there's any kind of like document to point at. Look at a document. This document points to this vehicle. No such thing exists. Why do I feel that way? Because if you see on the top right here, I took a look into the Pursue Release 01. You guys might have heard of that a couple weeks ago. That was the big data dump that was a result of the weird interchange online between former President Obama and current President Trump, where Obama went on a podcast and like off the hook, he answered some kind of really fast question. And so I was like, hey, so do aliens exist? He's like, oh yeah, totally. And they're like, what? And everyone's just like, okay.
I haven't seen him though.
Okay, so yeah, within about 4 hours, Obama himself walks back the whole thing on Twitter and says, I was referring to the something equation, which says statistically they're out there somewhere. And if not in this age, then a billion years in the future or the past or some crap like that. No good, right? No good for anyone. But the weird thing is that Trump reacted because you think Trump would just ignore the whole thing. And he said, wow, it seems Obama released some declassified information and I might get him out of trouble by declassifying it. Did I say declassified first? Obama released classified information. Trump says he'll get him out of trouble by declassifying it. Now, a quick run of that, if you look through the legal, it doesn't make any sense. You can't declassify something to repair a leak and it's still illegal and stuff. But I think the real point was that he was getting him out of the trouble, not with the government. That's not what he meant. He meant of having to explain himself here because he basically admitted something that is classified if you read what Trump said. See what I'm saying here? So this is a weird wordplay, and I would think that Trump would not have responded at all. So let me move ahead on why I'm so convinced that that a classification statement would actually matter. I did this article here. Let me find it.
Just to pop in with a quick comment real quick too. As far as these like triangle shaped crafts, I mean, one of the other close things you can relate them to, which I'm sure is a continuation on from like the earlier project, is of course like the stealth bombers. So I mean, if you're looking at that logic, of course, and you're looking at these triangle crafts as potentially being like military crafts rather than like extraterrestrial crafts, I mean, it almost kind of seems like it would be like a continuation of like the stealth bomber program. And if that is the case, that it is a continuation of that, then of course they're probably trying to use these types of ships for, you know, secret operations. And if that also is the case, then it kind of goes into this idea that Orin and I have kind of mentioned, where they almost like intentionally try to let people believe that this is an extraterrestrial craft. Bingo. Just so that they can leave the mystery and also kind of stay back and say, oh, it ain't ours. We don't know who's working on it. We don't know who's doing anything with it. So again, when it comes to the triangle shaped crafts, I often wonder if it's a continuation of the stealth bomber project, and that almost kind of like leads way into being like a surefire thing that it's probably a military craft if it is triangle shaped.
Well, can we all agree that the military, whatever secrets it kept after World War II, it intended to keep at least until the next Great War, which is exactly where we're at now? I mean, whatever they're doing in Iran and with their little tricks and stuff, I'm sure they're, you know, employing the full range of all this suppressed technology. I heard of the discombobulator. You know, have you guys heard about that? That was in the news.
I haven't.
Right. I don't know.
Is
what
that another
is.
Continuation of the Havana Project, like energy weapons?
I can only imagine so. Either that or it's an AI psyop real-time BSing tactic that makes you think your commander just called because it mimics his voice and stuff and tells your platoon to go over there and there's nothing there. You know, it could be something like that, but it's not declassified yet, right? So what am I getting at here? The CIA reading room, they're the ones that, you know, dumped all that pursue stuff. And what a funny acronym, pursue. Like, oh, we're going after it now, really, for real, right? That pursue thing was only a reaction to the fact that two presidents just had a tussle. That's it. Now there has to be a reaction from the intel community. That's it. That was a reaction. There's something new? No. You can go and download everything and do what I just did and have the LLM just try to find one piece of new document from that entire terabyte or gigabytes of data that they dumped. Just one something new that we haven't heard already. Zero. Nothing new. They're exhausting us, exhausting resources, and trying to make us constantly reconfirm the truth, which is that there's nothing out there. Fine. But what I find much more interesting is the stuff that they declassified in the past. If you look up the Mars exploration of May 22, 1984, remote viewing session, you will actually find that on the CIA Freedom of Information Request reading room right now, because it was extracted and declassified in 2000, and it's been there ever since. So
was that part of Stargate, by the way? Because I know that was around the same time that they were doing like the astral projection to try to find the Ark of the Covenant. Because I think we covered that, and that was, correct me if I'm wrong, or wasn't that 1986 or 1988?
I don't remember exactly, but yeah, sometime in that time period, I feel like.
You're absolutely right. The Stargate was part of 3 different projects, one of them which involved remote viewing, and kind of led them to the idea, you know, through the technology that remote viewing leads to remote teleportation. And then they shut down the whole project and said, oh, we couldn't find anything. Okay, fine. But what about this one? Because I don't care about the fact that they said that they couldn't find anything. That just means we have to take the CIA at faith value, and I don't think we can do that, considering the reputation. More importantly, because they most likely just handed it all off to some other entity and not called CIA, probably not part of our government either, and therefore can claim plausible deniability all this time. So more importantly, if they declassified in 2000 and it existed in 1984, then there was some sort of fight to bubble it to the surface, or it's a psyop to fake us out, to make us, you know, I don't know exactly, except it doesn't make any sense on any of those threads. What does make sense to me is that somebody demanded this be declassified. Of all the things that we found, this thing deserves to be known. That's my takeaway. And I could be totally wrong, but I really just don't see any other reason why they would fake all of that and then declassify it as if it was a real session. And then later on, everyone that saw this happen, you can look up Slate articles, tried to explain it. They said, we don't know what to make of this recent document, you know? So no. So my point is, no one has an official explanation for this 1984 RV. That no one does. All you can say is that there's no such thing as remote viewing. Fine. But if you read the session, it's amazing. And I was always planning to investigate it but I had no idea what I was going to find because I only ever had one screenshot from the whole thing that some guy posted on their Mars site saying that we did remote viewing on Mars. So I wanted to see, okay, well, if I'm looking at Pursue, I might as well check for that too. And while my investigation went nowhere, I could not believe that I found this much older document. And it said in 1 million BC. so right off the bat, I was just like, BC, you're telling a telepath to look a million years in the past? I don't understand that at all. Now, the technology is supposed to be based on coordinates. Imagine entire planet as a sphere that can be turned in both directions, like a 360 joystick. And a telepath, imagine that their entire ability to remote view based on being on places they've already been familiar with, or randomly rotating in both directions until they find a coordinate. That's what they say it works. That's how they say it works. There's no way of confirming this because it's not official, science. But but as far as the million years BC, that one just really stunned. I couldn't believe that there would be some physical way for a telepath to say, "Oh, now I'm going to go a million years, 100 years, sure, 10 years, sure." But I need to know the mechanism. How does a telepath think they're looking in the past? So it occurred to me that, and this is just my guess now, that they must have been lying to the telepaths because obviously they didn't want them to know that they were looking at things in real time. They just wanted them to believe it was millions of years in the past. It didn't really matter because the telepath's main ability was coordinates. You can see the review session. They don't change the time period. They just change the coordinates. And then one final giveaway, and this is just about the spookiest part of the whole thing. It's like a monster movie, I'm telling you. You read it. At the end of it, this telepath is going through this location, these pyramids, finding these creatures, a little depiction. They're humanoids, just like us. They evolved separately, and they've given up on their planet. And we've already seen this in science fiction media. And War of the Worlds, H.G. Wells predicted it, so forth. But here, the CIA reading room is actually suggesting it. And this telepath goes in the pyramid and into the mind of one of these creatures and says, what was it like before? And they find out in the remote viewing session that the creature is going through his memories and saying, "Oh, it looked like this." And the telepath said it looks night and day, blue sky and water and technology. And now this planet is ruined. Something is wrong, and they're hiding in a pyramid. And they've sent out a crew to go find like a new place to live. I mean, it sounds like science fiction, but it came out of the CIA. So the weirdest, spookiest part existed right at the end, at least to me, when the telepath, who apparently got electrically neutralized at certain points and stuck in certain regions and had to pull out and pull back in. All this sounds very realistic to me, honestly. It basically said something about one of the beings that he was remote viewing. He said, "He seems to think I'm a hallucination. He doesn't know what to make of me." I was just like, whoa, okay, this isn't a million years in the past. This is real time, obviously. Otherwise, it wouldn't react to you, right? And so I was looking at where in the science of remote viewing has anyone ever suggested a two-way interaction? Only in mythology, all over the place, of course. But in real science or anything considered remote viewing, absolutely not. For whatever reason, that's ruled out. There is no scientific way to prove that if you can view something remotely, you can also influence it. That's what they ruled out. So all we got to sort of just do is say that the CIA didn't want to tell us about this technology that they found. And they certainly didn't want to tell us that these beings were apparently up there on Mars right now, hiding in pyramids in 1984. All of this stuff apparently is stuff they don't want us to know. Now, why do I think that? Because I could just take another big leap and say it really was a psyop after all. And that's because of the video game Chrono Trigger. And it just really struck me that the plot of Chrono Trigger matches up perfectly with these beings hidden in, domes in this case, in a ruined world that's going to die soon. And, using these Enertrons to stay alive, they have absolutely no food. They're sort of in a hibernation class state, and anything that couldn't hibernate for years is gone, that kind of thing. It's not necessarily the whole world, but certainly the middle hemisphere of Mars, where if you look today, you don't really see much but desert and sand. And and in the late 19th century, when all of those airships showed up, it was the exact same time when things were seen on Mars, Powell's canals and so forth, which are all gone now. You can't see them anymore. So whatever happened, I don't know. It's dismantled. I can only speculate on that. But there's one other part of the remote session that really caught my attention. I mean, it's almost like this document was made specifically to entrap someone like me who's looking for facts like this. And that's how perfect it is. So I'm not
You got me on the edge of my seat with this one too, so
Yeah.
I completely understand that one.
Yeah, and I'm not ruling that out, by the way. There's a part where the being describes what happens. He says, we have no idea what destroyed our planet. We don't know. All we know is that some kind of giant light in the sky, some kind of comet or energy sort of just poured into the planet. And afterwards, everything was different. So it's like, that's my theory.
I was going to say, it sounds like electric universe theory.
Yeah, it's electric universe theory played out in interplanetary discharge occurring in modern times. What discharge? Well, that was my theory. My theory was that the mud flood energetic events, which is also part of my theory, is that the mud flood, which if it happened at all, was caused by an energetic event. And therefore, if we're looking for the energy, it most likely was a geopolitical strike, a type of a war, kind of a precision strike to destroy the Tartarian Empire and all of its allies. Maybe, I don't know. But the weird part is that in all of the science fiction media, and in this story too, there's this persistent myth that when they destroyed us, they destroyed themselves too. And it's there in H.G. Wells, and it's there in Ender's Game, and it's just always there. And now I find it in an actual CIA declassified document. So what this being is basically describing is they don't even know what was happening on their planet at the time politically. It was probably a very divided planet just before things went bad. And that's because it seems to me, if you look at all the media again, that the telepaths were destroyed by the metal or transhuman people. What media? Well, X-Men, right? X-Men, the main two people of X-Men, a telepath and a magnet person, It's always been there. It's always been the struggle. And what is the struggle, of course? One, the telepath wants us all to live in peace, and the metal guy says that's never going to happen, and we all must be destroyed, controlled, ruled. They've always been telling us the same story. So I'm just saying, well, maybe it just was a real story. It actually is what happened. It's so sad and depressing that it's almost like easily dismissible, and a scientific-minded person would say, no, it could be that. It would have to be something in addition to all the stuff you just mentioned. Geopolitical, sure. Tartarian Empire struggle, oh yeah, totally. But as for the blast itself, why would somebody on Mars destroy something on Earth knowing they would destroy everyone at home? Why would they do that? That's the biggest question of all. And so I guess the logic really just comes down to, if you look at that.
So Ari, I'm sorry to stop you. Just
please.
to confirm that I'm following you correctly.
Yeah, please.
So you're suggesting that this attack, or I'm sorry, what's the term you use for the energy blast?
Energetic events, because I'm not describing exactly how it happens. But
So,
I assume it's a giant space laser of some sort, a directed
Okay, so
energy
if
weapon.
I'm following you correctly, you're suggesting that what the event that caused the mud floods and destroyed the Tartarian Empire was actually done by this Martian civilization. Is that correct?
That's correct. And
Okay, gotcha. I just wanted to make sure I was following you correctly.
I know.
I think he had mentioned that on the last episode, but it was only like a little footnote, and then you continued on to the next thing.
I know. Earth's history is rich enough without Martians, right? But that's just it. It's like Martians have always been there in our media ever since Daffy Duck visited Mars and met Marvin the Martian. I mean, we all grew up on this stuff. We just need to know, why did the CIA and the media sort of put it together, this same repeating story for us to believe in and or dismiss? Is there a reason for that?
Even on the flip side too, you also think about like the mythology that's related to Mars, and it's always related to like war and like a warring planet. So it's almost like that was used as like a metaphor. Right. Almost like you were mentioning, I was going to bring it up, that the whole idea between like the magnetic guy and the telepathic guy, it almost kind of seems like it could theoretically be a metaphor for a utopian society versus like an industrial society. So a lot of the time we talk about this stuff, that sometimes these like movements or these pushes, after a while, they start becoming like characterized and like personalized into like becoming this like archetype of like a person rather than like an actual force like it was intended to be. So, I mean, even looking at it from that viewpoint, I mean, people trying to look for a utopian society versus like an industrial society, and then the industrial society just destroys everybody in the process of what they're trying to do, also seems like a great metaphor rather than just one specific person on either side.
You're right, and you could tie it all down to communism if you want. Everyone that wrote books in the '90s was aware of, well, not everyone that was writing stories like this was aware of what was happening with the fall of the USSR, and they could basically just say, well, history of communism, a bunch of different versions of communism came. Naturally, some may have existed from the prior kingdoms. Like all those Cathars and so forth. They all had communism already. It's all there, and then one version, Marxism, sort of said no to all the rest and just like consumed them all, hijacked them all. And now the word communism is so tainted that you can't even talk about the utopia without talking about this Marxism future that supposedly comes with it. So yes, you're right. All of these things can be tied directly back to metaphor, but it was the metaphor of our time that it was happening on Earth. All I'm suggesting is that if there is life on Mars and it is interconnected as I think it is, with I don't know if I mentioned the connection with the stock market, and most recently I've investigated the connection with the Gaza Israel crisis, weird flare-ups that occur when Mars is up to the certain node of the moon, which is, I forget the term, but it means that Mars is lined up with the moon and Earth, and it could be on the other side of the sun too. Other side of the sun, Mars, Sun, Earth, Moon, or Moon, Earth. When that happens, stock market goes nuts for consistently for over 100 years now, 110 years, consistently, every single lunar node. And then Gaza war somehow matches it. So all I'm saying is that there's a French guy who wrote books on it. You can go look him up, and you can check out my website, of course. If that's true, then all I'm saying is that the communism was also happening on both places. And the metaphor seems to stop at the metaphor, but really just got to look at the revolution. The revolution was the elimination of all the telepaths, all of the original memory of the Earth. Because if you really think about it, we're really just talking about controlling memory here. You can't just burn books to control memory. You can't just enslave tribes. They persist memory. In fact, if you really think about it, memory is stored in the rocks, in the buildings. That's why so many things were haunted. And I can cover that in a second if you want. The point is that the destruction of telepaths, accidental or not, created a sort of a runaway version of communism that could not be helped. There wasn't anyone that could possibly have stopped this anywhere on any planet, because the nature of Marxism is say, oh, this is not my fault, by the way. I may have caused this by speaking this and that, Mussolini and Hitler and stuff, but it's not my fault. They'll always say, and this is not how I intended it. That's the real nature of Marxism. And what I mean is, Ender's Game is implying that the decision to do this was not a group decision. It was pushed away from all the leadership and given to children of all people in a simulated reality. You didn't even know what the heck they're doing, who decided to do this. I can buy that story, actually, because they do the exact same thing these days with MK Ultra and modern leaders. They just want them to absorb all the responsibility and sin. I mean, hell, look what Obama has done in his career. But so that aside, any questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to pop in real quick. I think what you were saying about and again, I can't remember the term you used for the seers, or the people who have the ability to
telepaths.
Yeah, to telepathically communicate, being destroyed in order to kind of wipe out the evidence and the memory of Tartaria. I think that's really interesting, because that's always been kind of one of my questions about the whole Tartarian Empire story is, in the scheme of things, the supposed destruction of this was not that long ago. And you would think there would be some sort of cultural memory passed down from, your great-great-grandma or something like that. So I think that goes a long way in kind of answering some of those questions on, why isn't this more known and culturally remembered and passed down? Well, maybe there was some sort of event like you're speaking of. So I think that's a really interesting point.
Yep, I'm going to tangent real fast because I know you're going to love this.
Oh, also, I want to bring this up just as a continuation of what he was saying, because you're already talking about this whole idea of like communism.
Yeah.
I mean, continuing on to like the whole idea of like Maoism and trying to separate the generations. I mean, part of that, of course, is like, you separate the ideology. And in turn, once you're able to separate the ideology, you start putting this future ideology into the younger generation.
Yep.
And then in turn, as their ideology becomes so different from the previous generations, it creates this gap where they don't feel like they can communicate with anybody previous to them because they're not even on the same wavelength as them anymore. So continuing on with this communism idea, you get rid of the telepaths and then you use this ideology of Maoism to try to separate the generations. And now you're separating stories into generations where if you're not communicating with previous generations, all those stories are getting lost as those people die off.
Oh, yeah. And just watch Killing Fields if you need a visual demonstration of how that works. If you don't mind, I'm going to pivot to this article I posted, The
Absolutely.
Real Ghostbusters. And this is related to memory stuck in buildings.
Okay.
I was looking at, this is a theory I've had for a long time, wanted to investigate it. Also, sort of personal story, I came to Savannah about 4 years ago, so I've been hearing nothing but, hey, you should go on the ghost tours and stuff, and I will maybe someday, but first I want to do a deep dive, and because I got a lot of personal theories about ghosts. First of all, I start with Maxwell. I always start with Maxwell. He's like the key to the universe. He just reminded everyone in the 1920s that there is an ether and it's required for all equations to function. Communism, again, just like stomped out of the ground and replaced it with nothing. But the point is that it was never really fully debunked. And if it's true, then ether is basically the plug-in replacement for a lot of other crap that we are struggling to believe in, like, virus genomes and stuff. There's no evidence of that. But etherical viruses? Oh, totally. Yeah, you can explain it that way. But what about ghosts? First of all, there's two categories as far as I'm concerned, because no one ever talks about them, right? They talk about them as if it's all one big thing. The first category is the real-time spiritual. You are talking to something and it's talking back, because it's a spirit. That's the first category. The second category...
Intelligent haunting.
I know, exactly. And the second category is memories. They're drawing out of the buildings and stuff that aren't necessarily the same spirit. And I know a lot of people get confused about that stuff in cemeteries, and it's actually maybe a little bit offensive because, they might feel like one day they saw either a dead relative. And here I am saying that you didn't see it. You just saw an echo of them. It's like, well, that's disappointing and depressing. Well, no, it's not. Your dead relative is not hanging around in the graveyard. It's off in its next life. It's reincarnated. So
yeah, it's residual hauntings. Yeah, usually intelligent and residual is usually the terminology I usually hear for this one.
Totally.
When people are like hardcore into breaking this stuff apart, of course.
Yeah, and I'm also not saying there isn't this huge overlap where like the spirits can come back to places they're very familiar with, like the place they died or the place they were buried. But anyway, I made this article called The Real Ghostbusters because I was looking into, again, this Pursue drop. I got bored with it. I looked at the other stuff. I want to see if they had anything related to ghosts, at all, the CIA. And they don't. They don't have anything. But they just have the telepath stuff, which is really close. So I was dead-ended on a lot of things about this. But then I came up with this idea randomly, just like a litmus test. If there was some kind of attempt to destroy memories of Tataria or anything ancient, and we're talking about like Joseph Smith stuff, right? Joseph Smith felt the spirit tell him where to go find metal tablets, which then told him a story. So maybe if that's a real story, they're afraid of that repeating. I can see that. We're talking 19th century here. So they go out and they start destroying buildings, right? In the 19th century, we don't really know why they did that. We assume to destroy the memory of Tataria and its old authority. Everyone forgot it anyway. I don't get it. I think they should have left those buildings up, frankly, except for there is one other reason. They might have been afraid of what's stored in those buildings. And I'm not talking about just ghosts. There could be like trapdoors and all kinds of passageways. And there's like the one book that they'll never know about that'll be found in the 20th century that'll ruin everything. So I can actually see a lot of non-ghost reasons for them to destroy all of those buildings under the guise of the World's Fair. You can look into that whole thing. But then there's this other reason, right? That's how they get rid of the memories that are stored in the buildings too. Talking about very resonant buildings here, not sheetrock crap like today and wood. We're talking about buildings that conduct energy. So we're talking about the massive potential for storing memories. Taking out those buildings, they take out more than memory, also the ability to communicate, blah, blah. Now, here's my little test. Since I'll never prove that one, what other well-known ghost story I'm not talking about something that isn't documented, has sort of like this pattern. Well, I was surprised to find out that there's a story about Churchill visiting the White House in the 40s during the war or right after, and saying that he saw the ghost of Lincoln. This is documented. And is also documented his physician's response to it. And this physician said, this man is not easily spooked or easily fooled. Okay, so that's something, right? That's documented evidence. Churchill saw Abraham Lincoln in the White House. All right, so what happened next? Right after World War II ended in 1951, Truman guts the entire White House from top to bottom, leaving absolutely no stone unturned, and replaces everything. And I can't even imagine why they would do that, non-ghost reason, except for to totally set up the next future presidents, which is like the super, super, super obvious reason for Truman to have done that. I mean, he was such a treasonous president for a lot of reasons, but besides that, he totally set up Nixon. He allowed that whole place to be bugged like it was bugged, and nobody to this day wants to talk about it because this is all politically charged crap after Nixon was completely Watergated out of existence. It was it. The story was over. He actually won that lawsuit though, proving that that property was his. All those tapes were his and stuff, even though they're hidden in the walls and stuff. So all I'm saying is that Truman could have avoided this by not allowing the White House to be so easily bugged, by making it a secure location. He did the opposite. But aside from Truman being a bad president, it's really possible that within 10 years, they decided that that story coming from Russia was simply too serious to allow to ever happen again. Tangent, why the hell do I think Lincoln's ghost would really be in the White House? For 1,000 reasons. Well illustrated on shows like The Office. Anyone that looks at Lincoln knows that he was extremely upset about how the Civil War ended, and that he feared the bankers in his midst, and he feared the enemy, and he just wanted peace, and it didn't happen. And everyone played him, and then he got killed. So I really think that it's possible that they encountered, not even that much longer, what we're talking about, 80 something years, that he basically, that Churchill encountered that, because no one touched the White House at that point. And again, the whole story could be fake out to make the Russians look bad. It's totally possible. But my real belief is that with that one exception, which sort of is like a little bit of a smoking gun, honestly, I don't think I'm ever going to find any other evidence. I did find evidence, though, of studies suggesting that radiation, ionizing radiation, from rise of industrial everything, causes noise in people who are sensitive to it. And I've actually seen lots of testimony online of people who are saying that. All of it's considered hearsay and not serious, but the point is the government studied that too. And they basically said, we don't think it's a problem because the radiation caused by industry is ionizing background radiation, which is not the same as electromagnetic radiation. That's what the study concluded. Why? Because there's four forces of nature. Four forces in nature. Now, what I'm saying is that Maxwell's equation proves there's only one force in nature. That was the original theory for forever. It's called uniformitarian theory, and it's never really been disproven, honestly. And you got the modern science community walking backwards into the future, trying to prove things that they know exists, like the effect of dark matter, the effect of black holes on light, the medium between nothing, not saying ether, but saying 0-point energy and quantum and stuff like that. And like I said, walking into the same conclusion that Maxwell had all along. So I'm just getting ahead of him saying, okay, so we're going to find out unified, theory of mechanics of electromechanics, whatever you want to call it, the theory that's trying to bridge Einstein's equations with existing electromagnetic theory is already there in Maxwell's equations. And as a result of that, the background ionizing radiation was absolutely a factor in telepathic disruption here on Earth. And all of those testimonies we've heard from telepaths saying that they hear noises at night, giant booms, reporting them to the police show up, they don't hear it, stuff like that. Those stories are not taken seriously, just like all of the UFO sightings have been cataloged and shelved, and we're just like, it's been like that for like 80 years now, since basically World War II ended. All this technology just became suppressed, and the psyops began. So I say there was a real Ghostbusters, and the documents that came out in that time in the 70s and 80s not just inspired these movies, but the games too. That CIA document inspired Chrono Trigger, Ghostbusters inspired Ghostbusters, and the entire Final Fantasy franchise, inspired by Tartaria, at least up until 8. One more real quick tangent.
Standard template for soft disclosure, it seems. Like, you see this with almost everything, that, everybody relates soft disclosure to the whole idea of like releasing information with like UFOs and everything through movies, but the idea extends into like historical ideas to, of course, people associate things with a movie. They're going to first categorize it into fiction in their mind. So people wonder why they'd want to portray these ideas in fictional movies. And it's because, for example, everybody hears about this like weird predator camo phenomenon that's happening, and everybody's first way to describe it is, oh, it's like the movie Predator. So most people that aren't actually researching this, they instantly put it in the realm of fiction just because you're using a fictional movie to try to describe this concept.
Wow. Is there a new Predator movie, or is that just talking about the franchise?
Oh, I'm just saying, like, in general, like the whole like predator camo idea.
Totally.
It's just something that they like hide throughout different things, and they try to like make it so that you associate things with fiction. Like even like the whole idea with Harry and the Hendersons coming out in the 80s, and you start looking into the whole idea that there was actually government funding for that movie, and they make it into this like comical thing. So then it instantly turned into, anybody had a Sasquatch encounter around the 80s, everybody's like, oh, like Harry and the Hendersons. So people instantly categorize it as fiction in their mind because they're relating it to, a fictional movie.
Yep, absolutely. So speaking of tangent to my DEW investigation, another thing that happened when I moved here was big fires, although it just happened a couple months ago, and everyone's sort of still reacting to them. And there's all this stuff online about how it was exactly the same as Maui and the Palisades, and the cars are there burned to ash with the trees standing next to them, and anything painted blue got spared. And what else? And so I looked into it, and I noticed that the guy who was pushing it was mostly pushing this. For weeks now, every article he put on Substack was this, and and he had a petition. He said everyone needs to sign my petition to the fire chief of Atkinson County to say investigate the use of DEW lasers. And then he posted, I only got 27 signatures. I'm disappointed in you guys after thousands of likes. And so I replied and I said, look, you made the wrong petition. This is not the right petition. First of all, you said at the beginning of your huge rant that they're destroying houses to create high density apartment buildings, and they're going to ship a bunch of people, a bunch of Democrats in from Denver. That's what you're saying, right? And we're going to have AI managed mini 15-minute cities or something. So I said, first of all, that wasn't enough room. Second of all, you said 1,000 houses burnt when I only found 87. Third, all this stuff about AI, what the hell? Why are you doing this? You just made a bunch of people think that all of this is fake. When frankly, and I did a poll of all of the 150 comments he had on one of these threads. Again, LLM, I just tell it to do this and it does. So just asking, of all the comments, how many people either saw this stuff or believe the pictures are directed energy weapons? 80%. Okay, so a huge chunk of people are from Georgia here in the comments, and they believe in this, and this guy's leading them into this trap. So I said, what you need to be doing is create a petition to reduce or to extend the moratorium on high density housing in locations of giant tragedies, right? Would that not accomplish the exact same goal without mentioning AI, lasers, Bill Gates, or all the other stuff that he's put in that rant that he's expecting this chief to like do an official investigation on? Like, pick a topic, dude. So I looked into the actual evidence of whether or not it looked like there was lasers and it was hard to explain, and if it matches Maui, that part adds up completely. Yes, absolutely. And the whole thing about this happening after a sort of unprecedented drought, yeah, I totally believe that was geoengineering. In fact, I see the chemtrails spraying all the time. So that's not the question. The question is that what you should be asking a police chief to investigate? is there a effing thing he can do about it? Let's say his house actually burned and he saw it, a laser fire from the sky. Do you really think that a police chief can do anything about that aside from tell the FBI, you know? And what are they going to do?
Just acknowledging it.
Yeah.
Right. They're going to put it in the UFO files. So this is about, as you mentioned before, the predictive programming aspect of it. If they wanted us to believe that these lasers are not happening, they would never use it in huge amounts in ways that were obvious. They would do it in tiny bits. Test, checking the media, focus grouping all of us for the outcome, seeing if any of us can figure it out, checking their control opposition agents, making sure they're gathering up all of the people that are open-minded, asking questions, leading them into a trap that's laughed at by the media. Always does some sort of story that says something like, check these people out in their petition, and they mentioned Bill Gates and vaccines, even though it has nothing to do with this. And they get to point out all the obvious in like a 20-minute segment. So that's the pattern. We've seen that everywhere. So when it comes to this, I say yes, absolutely. It looks like they're using those damn lasers. They're hitting my state. And the only real thing that would ever stop this from happening is not like, knocking satellites out of the sky. It's going to be making sure that our country has some sort of, antibody sovereignty where it can actually defend itself and react to these things in some sort of sane way without dividing us more and making the media make people believe even less that it's happening. So I've covered predictive programming enough in the other sessions. I think you followed me there, but yeah, really scary stuff. It's never going to happen near the cities. And frankly, I think that's one of the scariest things about living out in the boonies or whatever you want to call it is that's where all the experiments happen. That's where the Russians got all their surprises. There's that, I don't know if I've ever mentioned it, but the thing that convinced me that there are zombies is this video from Russia, people in the helicopter looking at these farmers being attacked by what looks like human zombies. Just sort of like surrounding them and then grabbing them and just pulling them apart, just like in the movies. But the reaction of the people in the helicopter sort of just made it feel like it was just too real and not from a movie at all. Just another thing for me to investigate someday. But these things, yeah, they apparently always happen to the people living out in the wild. I just watched Tremors. That's where it happens. You don't want to live out in the isolated places. That's where they would do experiments. Go ahead.
Talk about soft disclosure too, man. Talking about the whole zombie thing. It seems like the whole idea of the zombie apocalypse towards the end, it always seemed to push into this like human variation of like rabies. And when you start diving into some of these like weird labs that start diving into like how like the whole Wuhan lab thing, for example, that's actually coming out now that they were actually working on a SARS variation.
Yep.
And the FBI is now acknowledging this and the CIA is now acknowledging this.
It became
so
political.
It doesn't seem like that far off of a variation to start doing something like this too.
No, it's right there. You know about the whole Resident Evil dealio, right? With COVID, right? I mean, I'm sure you heard of that theory.
I'd love to hear it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've heard this one.
Well, have you guys played the games or watched the movies? Almost everyone's seen one Resident Evil movie, right? And what was the name of that agency that created all the viruses that made all the zombies?
Umbrella Corp.
Umbrella. So their logo is the exact same logo as the lab in China, the one that everyone's talking about. That was given away like day one, and everyone pointed out, and there's like, what the F? Is this predictive programming? Like anyone that's played this game would know this is happening, and it just got laughed at by the media. But I think after that point, this whole thing has just been like this ridiculous. What's the word? It's just like a act of faith, I would say. It really plays into the problem that Chinese people have, honestly, with their government. Their government has brainwashed them. I never wanted to believe this, but the facts of coming out of China in the last 20 years, they believe things that just aren't true. The government pushes on them. That's communism. That's Marxism. Just how it goes. And one of the things that they believe is that there's no way that their lab could have possibly actually worked on this worldwide virus. And they're so upset when Trump pointed this out in his first term, long time ago, that since we know it came from them, China better pay us something in the billions dollars range as a reconciliation by removing that much of the debt that we owe them, which would be a nice token of gratitude in both directions if you follow it. And there's like, what did he just say? So I'm just saying that's back in 2019, that's when we knew what was going on. We knew that there was predictive programming telling us what was happening. And making it so that when it reaches the media, they have this whole story, even pointing at the similarities and saying, yeah, it's a coincidence, but there's no evidence. There's no evidence. They'll just keep saying that over and over. They'll say there's a coincidence that this lab that has a virus that may have caused an outbreak worldwide is so similar to a game. Then they'll say something else. They'll say, well, but there's no zombies, so that's not similar, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, hold on a second. There were no zombies, correct. Could there have been zombies? Was that part of the plan? I mean, all signs point to there being a plan, it being rolled out, and it being stopped. And all the evidence is there. Just look at Operation Warp Speed. Regardless of what that vaccine was, or even if it worked, the point was it was that sovereign antibody thing I mentioned before, our country's ability to make a vaccine and distribute it so that we don't have to rely on WHO, foreign factories, filled with people that really just don't care about the quality, and then find out that the vaccines that entered all of our children have byproducts from factories that were never actually studied because they're not part of the original, RNA, DNA, whatever the F they came up with, and part of something else entirely called, that was that metal called, that metal that everyone was saying for so long. I forget.
Graphite.
Graphene oxide. Graphene oxide as a byproduct from a factory. That's so scary because graphene oxide is it's like a circuit board, and it sort of spreads through your system, and suddenly you're like a walking computer that could be accessed by 5G towers. Again, none of it's been proven, but that's the doorstep of zombies right there. All they really got to do is, turn the knob on those towers from the 5% that they're meant to operate on to the 300% range, and then bam, all of us are either dead or zombies, and the dead reanimate from the energy and all that stuff. It's all in the movies. Actually, if you want to know which movie parallels this the best, it's an obscure British movie called Life Force, 1985, I think. It has nothing to do with the video game. And it just shows the exact same thing. Something in the sky, energetic, creating the zombies. This time it wasn't even a virus. So that's my point. The particular programming was telling us exactly what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, preparing, like you said earlier, the next generation for it, splitting them from the previous generation, who's never going to accept these things. And then when it finally happens, next generation mostly suffers and dies off. The new generation was like, I don't know why they never believed in this. It was in the news. It was in the games. It was in the movies. Like, I'll say one more thing about
even
Resident
the
Evil.
stress state of it too. I mean, it seems like the whole zombie apocalypse movie concept was really, really big, and they were really starting to overkill it right before COVID.
Yeah.
It almost kind of seems like it may have been somewhat of a prep up, even beyond the whole idea of eventually we were going to start continuously pushing these kind of bizarre viruses and normalizing that concept.
Yep.
But if people have already spent 5 years, 10 years watching these continuous zombie movies of everything starts off as a virus and then eventually it turns into this big thing. Then all of a sudden you drop something even just like COVID, and instantly everybody in the back of their mind goes into this subconscious idea of now I'm in survival mode, and the best way to survive is to avoid everybody. So it's almost like, they were underlaying the idea. Yeah, exactly. Underlying the idea and making it so people are already in that high stress moment right before something happens. And then all it takes is just a little virus, and that's the first thing people associate it with.
Right. And all we're doing is repeating history. Spanish flu pandemic and the polio scare, which polio ended before the virus came out. One more thing about this. If you look at it, just occurred to me to look at the history of Resident Evil once I realized that we're talking about Capcom here. Capcom, I have a beef with them. They made some of my best games, some of my favorite games back in the day. All the Mega Mans and stuff, Street Fighter.
I'll say Street Fighter.
Yeah, Street Fighter 2 was like this world unifying game. It was so amazing. And then with Mega Man X2, their last amazing game, sharp decline. And then from then on, persistent, bad quality, furries, and all kinds of crap that wasn't there before. What the hell happened? Well, let's see. 2 years after X2 came out, Resident Evil 1 came out. So if you follow what I'm saying here, I'm saying that if Resident Evil was some sort of plan from the first inception that mentioned all this stuff back in, I think, 84 or 86, I forget. No, not that, no, 94, 96. Then they hijacked Capcom. That's it. That's my plan. That's my theory there. I mean, I don't see any other explanation for a sudden, sharp decline in Capcom, plus a creation of a game franchise ends up being instrumental in the world's planned pandemic. That is just too hard to believe as a coincidence. So going back to that timeline, I say something horrible happened to Capcom. They did the thing that they always do. They fired everyone and they hired new people. They went a new direction. Street Fighter Alpha and all that crap. Took them forever to make that crappy Street Fighter 4 and 5. Yeah, I could talk all day about how bad they were. They abandoned their Strider franchise. That their remake was like 2015 or something. Anyway, that's the kind of investigation I think that's just sort of a smoking gun at this point. It's not necessarily whether or not you believe that Capcom, sucked after that. I can show that evidence on the forums. That's documented. The real question is, would it have taken a full hijacking of a video game company in order to push a narrative like Resident Evil? I think so, because the last thing I'm going to say is that I honestly believe that zombie movies are unpopular to make, that nobody ever wants to be associated with them. They always have to be associated with Ramiro and stuff. And that it took this feeding frenzy that we saw in 2015 after subsequent writer strikes and just, a sharp decline in Hollywood movies. Then we saw a huge rise in World War Z and all that crap suddenly coming out with top-rated people. And so, yeah, I do believe that did predate COVID. It was on purpose. And it did require a time when even the movie industry had to be consolidated, much like the video game industry. We don't have time today, but I did this investigation to all the video game communities and how they were consolidated too. How agents were essentially watching the game communities and the movie fan edit movie communities. And I've seen people say this and testify, and making sure that they will never have to compete with what the free people create. I'm one of them. I've been creating free music for a long time. I want to create free games and do websites. And I constantly got blocked by people within communities that said, we're not going to look at it. We're going to stay pro-corporate, pro-profit aligned. And had celebrities show up and had conflicts with them and stuff. And it just seemed that every single online community became consolidated into a single narrative in order to A, not compete with with the industry, B, not spread information that they shouldn't be spreading, telling stories they shouldn't be telling, kind of like what I'm doing. And C, most important here, they're consolidating all the kids. If you look at Homestuck, it's just the best example ever of how the entire narrative was always a specific demographic of young internet kids on chat rooms that semi-suicidal themes and in transsexualism, also making fun of transsexualism. So that whole community was contributed for free mostly by a lot of its fans, yet made into a for-profit community. All I'm saying is that nothing breaks the pattern. Every single community followed this pattern. I don't think it was an accident. I think that just like in the movies, they had to prepare everything for this moment so that there wouldn't be just some guy out there making a video game or a movie or something saying, here's what I really think happened. There's been enough of that. Like House of Cards, that was totally just like blowing open the Democratic Party. It's just, you guys even realize what they're doing? I mean, only one season, really lasted any quality, and then you saw how Kevin Spacey went down afterwards. So there's just a direct correlation in every case. That's what I found.
Say, Orin, you've been taking notes for a while. You got anything you want to pop in with?
No, I've just been writing down things I need to look up after we get done recording. 'Cause, I mean, as always, Ari, you're just a wealth of information. I can't imagine how much time and effort and energy it takes to put all this together and all these pieces. And you know so much about so many things and how you can just weave all these different topics together.
Thanks. I'm a bit obsessive.
But it's incredible, and it's always a joy to have you come on. And I feel like I learn something every time you come on the show. So we'll definitely have to have you come on again and teach us some more at some point.
You bet. It's been great.
I would say, just like he was kind of saying, man, you never really know how one concept's going to turn into another, but you have a really good way of describing what you're trying to say and leaving it at a point where there's very few questions that really need to be asked because you explain your ideas in such intricate detail and how they connect into the next idea that, man, like I've said on Inquiries a million times, dude, we end up going through these shows. I'll have some comments that pop in, but there's not really much room for questions because you make sure that you cover almost every single intricate detail, which is why I appreciate your research so much, man.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I feel like everything is kind of interconnected like that.
Absolutely. We talk about that concept a lot on this show. So, your research and your work and your way of thinking just, falls right in line with that. So,
absolutely.
That's why you're such a great guest. And like I said, hopefully we can have you come on again and share some more of your knowledge with us.
Sure thing. Anytime.
Man, after that last episode, too, and diving into a lot of the occult stuff, I just want to throw out how much stuff that we've been diving into, even within our own research, is connected in with your research with electric universe theory, for example.
Great.
Like, I feel like, Orin, that probably comes up almost every other episode, diving into the occult stuff now.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. And this is something me and Shane talk about on the show a lot. But, a lot of this, the topics we cover on the show, like Shane will be working on his own thing and I'll be working on my own thing. And we don't necessarily like talk about what we're working on in depth, and like the connections that pop up between, different things we're researching is always kind of mind blowing. And same thing in your work. Like, it just takes a little bit of digging below the surface to kind of see these connections between all these different topics. And I think you do, wonderfully about, like I said, tying all these different topics together. And you always show your sources. You always show the work. So, I mean, like Shane said, it's not like anybody can really even question or argue with you after you present your information. So again, kudos to you, Ari. You're an incredible researcher and a great guest to have on the show.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Well, I guess kind of starting to wrap stuff up then, man. If anybody wanted to go and check out your main website, if anybody wanted to check out this personal blog, where can everybody go and find this stuff? And if people have any questions about anything, where can people contact you to possibly ask them further questions?
Definitely. Go to paradigmthreat.net and you'll find my website. And at the top header, you'll see a Substack link where I'm posting all my articles. I started doing that because I hit meter limits and had to rebuild my website. It's back up now, but I'm sort of focused on Substack for a bit. So definitely check out my new articles. I'm posting almost one article per day right now.
Okay.
Well, I'll make sure that I include those links down in the show description so everybody can find it quick and easy. And as we were mentioning before the links, man, it's always an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. And we'll definitely have to do it sooner rather than later, like we just kind of did this time, man, because I already feel like there's a million different avenues that we could already go in just off of this conversation.
Oh, yeah, there is.
All right. Thank you again, Ari. It was a pleasure as always.
You bet. I'll see you guys.
All right. We'll see you, man.